I got a Patreon account. They're the reason I get to sit here and interview you. So I give them a question. This is from Darv Swery. Was there ever a story that you were telling that actually made your skin crawl?
There was this guy who he's a teenager who kind of lost his mind and he wound up killing somebody, which is bad. But the story is that when he was on the run, he wound up finding his way into this family's house and he burrowed his way into their walls and lived in their walls for I think a year or two before he was finally found. And when he was found, get this, we have the father who's got 3 young girls, I think, in the house. He opens up one of their closets because he keeps hearing strange sounds in the closet, and he opens it up, and standing in the closet was this teenager who was wearing, I think, his wife's dress or something, and he was carrying a hatchet, and he's in the man's house, and he discovers this burrow hole into his walls that had been there for a year. And so the father escapes with his kids, and this guy ends up getting arrested or whatever. But it was a long enough time to how?
Whoa. Before we dive in, everybody gets a gift.
I'm familiar.
Even you, John. And,
Thank you, man.
Probably the only reason you're here.
That is.
It's all good. Dude, I don't blame you because those things.
I actually really wanted to. So we came with a gift for you as well. So we have, this is from our original line of merch we did. It's our most popular item. It's a crew neck that we don't really make anymore, or at least not that version. Man. So this is the best item we actually sold. It's just a simple crew neck, good material. Hope you like it, dude.
So this is in the vault.
This is in the vault.
This is the OG. Perfect.
It's a nice material. It's real nice.
It's getting framed.
There you go. Put it up, dude.
I'm going to have you sign it. It's going in the SRS museum.
Nice.
Thank you.
Yeah, hell yeah. When I was growing up, there were scheduled fights between teenagers to prove, who was tougher or whatever. Physical violence was a big part of my upbringing. Fighting was a part of it.
Are we talking UFC type?
Yeah, gnarly fights.
Who would do the scheduling?
Scheduled as in dude, 3 o'clock behind the dumpster, we're going to fight. Large reason why I didn't do well in school is I was much more focused on being tough and fitting in with my friends and being popular. And that's what mattered to me. Well, somehow or another, it got out that I was sitting next to this girl in my study period. And it got back to her boyfriend, who was very upset about this. I just got a phone call from 3 other people saying, Paul wants to fight you. All right, let's do this thing. Everybody knew, John and Paul are going to fight. Paul shows up with one person with him, no posse, hops out of his car and begins walking up the hill to me. He's maybe 10 feet away. And I'm while we're young, And then he beats the out of me. Didn't get a swing in. He had me on the ground, knocked out in 5 seconds. It humbled me in a pretty huge way. And there was this riot at UMass Amherst that happened a couple days earlier that I thought was, no big deal. I was just part of it, whatever. In my freshman year, our football team just dominated. And they got into this bowl game, and it wasn't even at UMass. And it was a good game, and the team lost. No one really cares about the football team. But for some reason, it was I think we should riot now that our team lost. And so if you look it up, the most densely populated place in the entire country, in the United States, is the southwest area of UMass Amherst. And suddenly this kid, he climbs up on the cafeteria where there's this awning that kind of looked out into the courtyard in front of all these high-rise buildings. And he goes, put this on YouTube! And he runs and jumps off of the awning. It's 20 feet up, and he's expecting the crowd to catch him, and they don't. And it was just chaos. People just began breaking stuff and running around. And in an hour, they had riot police on horseback, hundreds of them, surrounding Southwest, firing tear gas and rubber bullets inside. I've kind of always felt this want to volunteer and serve. I wonder what I could do in the military. And my mom's you should talk to Susan's brothers if you're interested in the military. And I'm why? Why should I talk to them? Oh, they're retiring. They were Navy SEALs. I'm what? How? I didn't even know that. And so I wound up meeting them out of interest, frankly. And they're yeah, whatever, dude. I was in the SEALs, the DevGru guys, big time dudes. And it was just the most incredible experience. I went up to see them in New Hampshire at the shooting range they were at. They quickly brought me in, we'll tell you about buds, we'll tell you about training, we'll tell you about this. But the big thing that stuck with me is they're you know what? A lot of people go to the SEAL teams to kind of reinvent themselves because a lot of people can try out for the teams, and it's just who can make it to the end. And if you do, you come out born again, the Navy SEAL version of yourself. I became obsessed with the SEAL teams, obsessed with the SEAL teams. I read every book that existed. I watched every documentary. I was fully committed to it. I actually have a huge thing that happened to me in third phase that did nearly, in my mind, almost end my career before it started. So you're out at San Clemente, you got a few weeks to go. You're going to graduate. It's all going to be good. And they bring you out to this field. They have CS gas, so tear gas. You're only exposed to CS gas in boot camp for like 5 seconds. It's super short. In buds, in third phase, you're going to sit here and take this entire canister for like 3 minutes. They put you in this square where you're all like in formation, and they're like, all right, take a knee. And so everyone takes a knee in the field, and they're like, there's only one rule: don't run. And they hold out their CS gas. They hold their gas masks on, and it's a sea of white. And fight or flight kicked in, and I sprinted without even thinking. I'm talking like I probably experienced
like, where the f*** is he going?
It was like 0.1 seconds into this event and got absolutely speared by my instructor. And he was like, get back in the group. No one else ran. They're just taking it like champs. So we're going to go to a mountain and we're going to execute people who are sleeping on the mountain that are fighters here. That's what we're going to do. And they're like, yeah. It was like so surreal. It didn't feel like this could be the thing we're going to do. I'm not even religious. And I kneeled and prayed in my room that we did not go on that operation because I was completely convinced I was going to die. Even though I had gone in saying, I want to die in combat, by this point, I'm terrified. But then the next night we went out, and going out the door the first time, when you leave the safety of the HESCO barriers and you're like out in the wild now, it was like so exhilarating, but also equal parts terrifying at first. And then it quickly became, over the course of the deployment, just so routine to be risking your life every time you leave the safety of the HESCOs. It's really hard to turn into the savage you need to be. But once it happens and you flip the switch and become the operator, you just enter this weird peace. And you're just, again, this is my one deployment to combat, but all the fear was gone. And it was like, this is kind of an amazing thing we're doing. At first, it was like exhilarating to be shot at. And then it just became like, you feel like you're just rolling the dice a little bit. And by the end of the deployment, it was like a lot of resentment that you hear that gunfire. And really, it's the first couple rounds that are going to be the ones that are going to kill people, because we are not going to be on the offensive. Due to the rules of engagement, we're basically like, we're here, and if you attack us, we can do something about it, but only if you attack us. And so there were these operations we go on where all you're doing is like, man, I hope they miss that first volley, because that's the most accurate shot. They got the drop on you and they can shoot you. A couple times when the shooting would start, I would immediately be out of breath. I need to like almost reset.
Did that ever fade away?
No, it got worse. I'm able to function and do the things I'm supposed to do, but the idea of like doing multiple deployments that are like this or way worse, that takes a special breed of person. And so as soon as this gunfire started, I'm standing in this relatively small spotlight that looks like a flashlight from God is shining down, but I can only see it on my nods. As the light is flashing around me, I'm standing there and I'm not shooting, doing anything. I'm behind the guys that are engaging, and I watched this grenade come over the wall, and it was like in slow motion. And every time the light flashed on my nods, I would see the grenade, and then it would flash again, it would disappear, and I'd see it again, and it would disappear, and I would see it again when it hit my shoulder. Like, it was the slowest thing, even though it happened in like a fraction of a second, because I'm like, that's a grenade, and I'm gonna die now.
You knew it was a grenade.
100%. Could not have been more clear it was a grenade. My brain was able to function at a level that is never has before. We all kind of like turned, and then it detonates, and it just felt like someone had taken a handful of rocks and just kind of chucked them at me. It didn't hurt at all. But my recollection of what happens from this point until medevac is not the way that it actually happened. Do you know who Mike Day is?
I do.
Mike was awesome. We got to the hospital and the doctors and nurses had no time for my wife. It was like, here's your husband, take him home. Yeah, pack his wounds, figure it out. But Mike is like, what the f are you doing? He was literally talking to the nurses and doctors being like, get the f over here and teach her how to do it. Like, she's been packing her husband's wounds, like, get over here and do it. And they're like, oh, sorry. And like, he made the transition as smooth as it could be at the hospital. On the night that happened in 2014, my wife got a call. Something serious has happened with your husband and we'll be in touch soon. Silence. I was in surgery. I couldn't talk to anybody. I'm gone. And then I got shipped to Germany, and it was like, I don't even know how many days I'd been there. I think I was there for at least a day before I woke up. Her experience with this injury was like the worst it could be. You're basically told, the person you love is potentially dead, and now we'll just wait. To her credit, she was like, I don't know what happened, and I don't want to scare his family. And so for like 12 hours, by herself, didn't talk to anyone, and just waited. I began to notice that there were manifestations of, I guess, PTSD or depression really coming from Afghanistan. I felt like I was so self-aware that it's like, no way. Like, I don't feel like I have PTSD. I actually feel like I'm proud of the deployment I did. I'm proud of what I'm doing now. I want to go deploy again. I have issues with my shoulders that are becoming a big enough problem that it's hard to do the job. Pain in my legs from the shrapnel. I am now sleepwalking, basically living out these like near-death experiences 5 times a week at least. Still to this day, by the way. Honestly, I had like a breakdown in South America. Like, I had all these weird thoughts of like, what the am I doing here? Like, I kind of hate this job. I just like spiraled into like an ungodly depression in like the first few weeks I was there. And my teammates had to step in and like take my gun away from me in my room in fear I would shoot myself.
Ben, your name's John Allen.
Yeah.
How did Mr. Ballen come in?
So I originally started an account on TikTok under the username John B. Allen 416. That was just the random username I had, but I didn't have any punctuation in it. And if you just glance at it, it looks like John Ballen. It doesn't. You wouldn't think, oh, that's John B. Allen, unless you knew me. You'd think that's John Ballen 416. That's who this person is. And that's important because when I was doing my I'm Mr. Navy SEAL stuff and getting a lot of hate, I, at the same time, kind of ironically, was getting all these young bucks that are trying to be SEALs like I was back in the day. And so they'd be very respectful in their Instagram DMs. They'd say, excuse me, Mr. Ballen, I have a question about the Navy SEAL training. Can you answer? And I got so many messages and I stopped correcting them. I was like, okay, so it just became Mr. Ballen. And then I actually very briefly got shadow banned. I was like, all right, I'll just make a new account. Clearly there's something wrong with it. And the first name that popped in my head was Mr. Ballen. I was definitely aware of the Sean Ryan show because I watched it on YouTube. But then we kind of went into our own, like, gotta make content 24/7 and we blacked out everything else. And then when our podcast began spiking to the top of the charts, I was like, dude, Sean's show is like top 10 always. That's not easy to do. You can spike once or twice, but I always saw, I was like, oh yeah, Sean Ryan's in the top 10. And then I saw the other day, you're like number 4 right now. And I'm telling you, like, you have something special with this show because not many people are prepared to sit and listen to long interviews. But with your show, it's the opposite. That's what they want. And that's not common. And it sets you apart from everybody else doing long form interviews because people don't stick around for that stuff. And something you're doing is working.
Well, I really appreciate that.
Yeah, man. But I was one of the first few guys into this dark structure. It's early morning, so it's still dark out. And I went in and I just saw that was the direction to go. There's no lights in the house. I'm on nods. My nods hit the overhang. We're really clearing this house. I can't just, hey, hold on, guys, let me fix my nods. And so I just turned and did what you're trained to do. I turned and I went to a stairwell, which was right next to me. And the guy behind me, he picked up the spot right behind me. I'm 5'10", is at least 6'3". He walks down this hallway and immediately it's like... There was a barricaded shooter with a shotgun aimed just up the hallway, and he was aiming roughly at where he thought someone's head would be, but so tall, it hit him here. It hit his plates, and it was a slug, too. Destroyed his plates. He was able to, engage. And so that guy was disposed of. But like, if I hadn't hit that overhang, I'm dead. He ended up living through that, and he lived through the second one. But that one actually haunts me in some ways more than the other. I can't believe I'm already I'm going to fail it again. I'm going to get kicked out of bots. This is it. OC8 is like 1 billion times harder than all of the others put together because it's basically like a drowning simulation. You have 20 minutes that you're going to be underwater, where probably about half of that you're going to be without air, where you go in the water and you have your tanks on, you got your weight belt on, you crawl to the middle of the pool where there's a lane marker and you're crawling back and forth. And then at some point your instructors come down and they start just with you. You fail the test if you react to your instructor. And then you follow this procedure, which is the same every single time. You have to show your instructors that no matter how stressed you are, you can follow this procedure until you can't anymore. I miserably failed the first 4 attempts. Like, I got rolled for performance. I could not pass pool comp. Even if you're panicking, there is a real hazard if you try to rocket to the surface in the middle of doing these tests. And I rocketed to the surface to the point where they're holding me underwater to get me from not going too quick to the surface.